Hello guys, this is your friend Dark Verse. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto went back in time and started a harem with young Tsunade, part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Surprise was etched on the faces of everybody at the sight of the unknown purple dujutsu. The sight of the Rinnegan will be the third time for Tobirama and the second time for Hiruzen. But it will forever be the first time anyone has witnessed the eyes with such intense concentration. The blonde stared at his opponent, Sensei, knowing that he was going to surprise his sensei with what's to come. Of course, he also knew that he wasn't going to be victorious in this fight. He wasn't meant to. It was a test of strength. A test to see just how strong he is and if he's anywhere near his old strength. Although substituting the raw and wild power of the Kyuubi for the precisely destructive power of the Rinnegan was bringing things along quickly. Alright Naruto-kun, if you do well against this man I'll give you some special technique training, the blonde heard his mother say from inside his mind. Naruto dropped into a stance, no if mother, when? And after I'm through with this fight I'll be waiting for the training, I wonder what it's going to be. He mused. The redhead rolled her eyes. Overconfidence is never a good thing a shinobi should have. Just fight the man while I think about what I should teach you. She spoke firmly, breaking their link after finishing talking. Naruto continued to focus on his sensei as he dropped into his own stance. I knew you were going to be a sponge for knowledge immediately after our first lesson. I've taught you well about the art of deception, he said, chuckling. Now let's see if you have the strength to back up your deception, he said, pushing his foot off the ground and jumping backwards as the blonde threw a flurry of shuriken. As Ryoko flew through the air, he threw his own set of shurikens at the previous set. Most of the thrown projectiles collided with each other. The others harmlessly flew by their intended targets. Naruto appeared behind Ryoko and sent a punch at the small of the man's back. The blonde knew the attack had the power to paralyze and ruin the career of any ninja, if it connected. He was not surprised when his fist phased through his teacher's body, disrupting the bunshin. You made the switch at precisely the last moment. Naruto mused out loud. Nice speed. The Junin said, back-handing the blonde. He was surprised when instead of the blonde tumbling across the landscape, a puff of smoke clouded his vision. Kage Bunshin, but how? The Junin darted out of the small smokescreen only for his face to personally meet Naruto's fist. Ryoko was sent back into the fading smoke and out on the other side, where he righted himself and landed on his feet. Impressive Naruto-kun, he said, wiping a small amount of blood from his lip. I don't know when you learned the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, but I am impressed that you were able, but you're not the only one, he said, forming the familiar hand sign, and two clones appeared. Let's see if your eyes can tell which one is the real me. Naruto smirked and glanced at Orochimaru for a short time, before returning his attention to his teacher. Sure, let's do this, he said, running forward. He was about to veer to the right, straight for the real body, when the one in the middle cut him off with a punch to the jaw. He would be flying if he didn't duck under the punch and sweep the clone under his feet and proceed to do what he didn't think he would ever do correctly. Konoha Dai Senpo, Leaf Great Whirlwind, he said, repeatedly spin-kicking the clone, forcing it to dispel. He returned to his feet and promptly blocked the other clone's strike. With a quick and intense burst of power, he lifted the clone off his feet and held him over his head and slammed him on the ground, making it explode in a cloud of smoke. Ryoko watched from his spot with a focused gaze on his prodigy student. Incredible, he simply thought. The blonde just exited the cloud and waited for it to clear, which wasn't long. He grinned. Yet again, I'm impressed with the display I've witnessed. It's really a shame that I have to take this up a notch. Ryoko said, vanishing from everyone's sight and yet again appearing behind Naruto and backhanding the blonde. This time his hand connected and Naruto was sent somersaulting across the ground. You're way out of your league, kid. At the sight of their friend being backhanded by their teacher, each of the future Sanin clenched their tiny fist in anger. I know you three want to jump into the fight and help Naruto-kun, but this is his fight. Tobirama said, keeping a close eye on the blonde's performance. Tsunade looked at her granduncle. What do you mean his fight? Naruto-kun is fighting a Junin. One-on-one, it's impossible for someone of Naruto's skill to defeat a Junin. At least let us all join in and we all might have a chance at victory. The female blonde said, looking back to see Naruto being overpowered by one of Ryoko's specialized kunai knives. I'm sure Ryoko-san won't take things too far. Hiruzen said, looking at the man who was currently swinging his knife at Naruto, forcing him on the defensive. Naruto-kun knows what he's doing. Tsunade-chan. Living with and caring for the boy this past year has taught me this, the young man said, putting a hand on her small shoulder. Tsunade just frowned and looked at Jiraiya and Orochimaru, hoping they felt the same way as her. Jiraiya's attention was only on the fight, having never seen something so intense in his life. He watched his friend jumping over Uchu-sensei and kicking the man in the back of the head. Yeah, kick his. He mumbled under his breath. Meanwhile, Orochimaru watched his friend, curious about this bloodline of his. I knew I wasn't delusional. I always thought it was slight flashes of the orange sunlight that was changing the color of his irises from blue to purple. But it was his bloodline. What is the name for those magnificent eyes? He thought, continuing to stare into the moving eyes of his friend, finding them amazing every second he gazed into their rippling beauty. Naruto kept on dodging Ryoko's persistent strikes. He really wanted to cut the blonde with that knife of his. It was then that Ryoko tried something new. He quickly threw his knife. Though Naruto wasn't expecting this, he was grateful that he was able to dodge with only a long, but shallow cut, along his right cheek. That wasn't all Ryoko did though. Naruto was in for a surprise as the Junin did a dynamic entry and kicked Naruto in the side of his head. Though it wasn't meant to be, as Naruto leaned back, maneuvering himself around the outstretched leg and delivered a kick right into his teacher's baby maker. Every adult male in the vicinity groaned in pain at witnessing Uchu Ryoko get kicked in the nuts. Ooh, even I felt that. The young Uzumaki thought, hopping back a couple of meters. Meanwhile, the ball-busted Junin crouched to his knees, eyes clenched shut in pain. He couldn't even think, the pain was so intense. This wasn't no simple real-life civilian nut kick. No, this was a fanfiction, ninja-based, faster than a regular civilian can see, nut kick. Either way, the pain affects us all. Kami, I hope he's alright. Naruto mumbled as his Rinnegan deactivated. Sensei, are you alright? He asked louder. Of course he's not alright, you just kicked him in the nuts. What man would be alright after that? Kushina questioned her son. Both on the outside and the inside, Naruto was truly sorry. He didn't mean to basically punt the man in the gonads. The blonde heard his sensei groan and mumbled something. What was that, sensei? He asked. I said I'm going to kill you. Ryoko mumbled again, rising to his feet, already in the process of completing hand signs. I'm going to kill you. Raiton. Lightning began crackling around Ryoko's mouth, before he hacked it out. The electrical ball of chakra headed towards the blonde. This all happened in the span of 3 seconds. The blonde should have known the Junin would retaliate the way he was right now. He should have known that any man would be furious after recovering from the incident that just occurred 5 minutes ago. Well, it was a good thing he knew this was going to happen, just not so fast. Thus he didn't fully dodge the attack. As the ball passed him and continued to travel into the forestry, the excess electricity shocked his right arm, rendering it useless for the time being. Ryoko didn't waste a second and vanished and reappeared on Naruto's right and kicked the numb arm, sending the boy into the forest, stopping only after he hit a tree. Yet again the Junin went through a set of hand signs. Sweden. Mizu no Yari, water spear. This time Ryoko spit out a large water spear straight at Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened upon hitting the tree, and it was impossible for them to widen any further upon seeing the large spear of water heading towards him. He quickly moved his head and covered it with his hands as the tree splintered and small, wet pieces of wood fly everywhere. Get up! His mother screamed, and he quickly got up and moved to another tree as 5 kunai embedded themselves in the tree. While behind the tree, Naruto held his numb arm. He looked around the tree, only to dodge another thrown kunai. Okay, so he's just waiting for me to come from behind this tree. Great, he thought with sarcasm. Well, it's time to get original, he thought, taking out 3 shuriken. He did a backflip, his feet landing on the tree, before he kept hopping up the tree. He went around the tree, landing on a branch, and quickly threw his shuriken. The Junin waited and waited. Before he looked up and seen 3 shuriken coming towards him, he effortlessly deflected them and seen Naruto coming at him from the sky. He was about to punch the kid when the clone dispelled and a cloud of smoke went up. His danger sense went up and he quickly jumped back, right before Naruto burst through the cloud with an orb of silver, swirling chakra, that immediately destroyed the ground, kicking up a lot of dirt. Ryoko was about to jump into the cloud of dirt when a hand grabbed his shoulder. I think that's enough, Uchu-san, I have seen all that was necessary, Tobirama said, clutching on Ryoko's arm to keep him from furthering his attack on Naruto. At this point, Naruto emerged from the dirt cloud, his Rinnegan deactivated. I'm sorry, sensei, for what I did. It was not my intention for that to happen. It just did, Naruto said with his hands up in surrender. Ryoko nodded after a minute of contemplation. Good, now I have some great news unrelated to what just occurred. It seems Kumogakure has never been part of the war, they just never seemed to stop their militarizing of their army. Though I disagree with their actions, I'm glad I caught on to the faulty intel. It would have caused problems if we were to attack Kumo, the Nadaime said, causing many of the Junin and Chunin in the area look at him in surprise. Naruto had a look of realization on his face, remembering that even though he hated history, that Kumo was never in the Second Ninja War, neither was Kiri, only Konoha, Suna, Iwa, and Aim. He thought, wondering when they'll enter the picture. Maybe not for years to come. Wait, wasn't Sarutobi the Hokage during this war? And didn't the Nadaime die during the First War? These questions came and went for the past year, never answered, for even his mother didn't know the answer. The only logical explanation would be that his traveling back in time has changed things further along the past. He shook his head as everything kept getting confusing. The more he thought about it, and the more he thought about it, the more he wished to leave it alone. He stopped when he felt a hand on his shoulder. The hand turned out to belong to his adoptive brother. Excellent fight. Most surprising. What was that technique at the end? I've never seen anything like it, he asked, causing Naruto to unnoticeably stiffen in realization. The blonde went through dozens of responses in his head, before he picked the most likely one. It's mostly the reason I've been training so hard for in the past year. It's the fruit of my efforts. He spoke with a foxy grin in place. You may have lost the fox, but you have kept everything that makes a fox a fox. Your cunningness and deceitfulness has only continued to grow ever since the disappearance of the Kyuubi. Kushina commented on Naruto's own response. Naruto grinned wider at hearing his mother. So does this mean that the others and I are a part of your new team? The man nodded, and this allowed Naruto to finally smirk. That's good, now I can do this, he said, punching the man in the side, playfully of course. You bastard, why'd you make me fight Uchu-sensei? Hiruzen chuckled. That was sensei's idea, I just went along with it, he said, quickly surrendering, knowing that because he lived with the boy, the pranks would never stop. Tobirama looked at the two, mostly Hiruzen, glaring at him, for so easily betraying him. He nervously chuckled, slowly backing up as Naruto and Tsunade stalked towards him. Well, it wasn't like I planned on it or anything, it's Zhu. Hey, what's that over there? He pointed to the forest. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on who you want to be, the children looked and got fooled. Because when they found out they were fooled, the Nadaime was already gone. I can't believe he got me. Naruto thought in shame. The blondes looked at each other. Go get him. At that, the female blonde nodded and proceeded to chase down her granduncle. Now that that's settled, I have to congratulate you on your performance. I knew you could handle whatever I threw at you. If it was up to me, I would recommend that you entirely skip being a genin. Ryoko said, patting the blonde on the back. I wonder how you gained that strength in the first place, he said with a hand on his chin, thinking about the subject. Naruto nervously chuckled. Yeah, I guess I was born with it, he said, nervously laughing it off, with his hand rubbing his own head. Okay, Uchu-san, stop making Naruto-kun nervous, let's just be glad that he's on our side. Hiruzen said as he began walking away from the academy. I have important matters to attend to at the moment. Naruto-kun, I'll see you at home, the rest of you, I'll see you tomorrow at Training Ground 7. What you did here will pale in comparison to what I'm going to put you through, he said ominously before vanishing with a shunshin. What did he mean by that? Orochimaru asked, walking up to Naruto with Jiraiya on the other side. Naruto shrugged. I don't know, but I think we're going to have an even tougher training than what we just went through. You think? Now what the hell was that earlier? I had no idea you had that kind of strength. Jiraiya playfully pushed Naruto. And your eyes, how'd you get them? Also, you're a bastard for using them on us during those spars. Orochimaru said, slapping Naruto in the back of the head. With that hit, Naruto dropped to the ground, exhaustion finally getting to him. I wasn't expecting that. What the hell did you do? He's dead. No, you killed him. Jiraiya yelled, crouched down beside Naruto's body. Orochimaru's sweat dropped and looked around to make sure they were alone. He sighed in relief to see nobody around. I don't want anybody to know I hang out idiots. Calm down, idiot, he's just unconscious. Our previous training and that fight drained his energy. Orochimaru said, shaking his head as he walked away to prepare for tomorrow. Jiraiya blushed in embarrassment. I knew that, he said, looking up and noticed nobody was around. Orochimaru must have went to continue training, I might as well do the same, the white-haired boy said, finding a better reason than returning to the orphanage, thanks to his parents dying in the beginning of the war half a year ago. Naruto's body was left alone in the academy training ground. XXX a week later XXX. Naruto sat in a tree inside of Training Ground 7 at 7 in the morning, he would always be the first one in the meeting place. Then Orochimaru would appear calling his name, in 3, 2, 1, and there he goes. Naruto, Naruto. Orochimaru said right on cue. After that, Tsunade would appear telling Orochimaru to be quiet. Orochimaru, be quiet, it's too early for that. Tsunade said, sitting under the tree, resting her own head against the bark. With that, they would be alone for about 10 minutes, Naruto resting in the tree, Tsunade also resting under the tree, and Orochimaru finally giving up on calling Naruto and taking out a scroll to read. After their 10 minutes was up, Jiraiya would appear with bags under his eyes and would promptly drop to the floor 5 feet away from the others. Of course, nobody paid attention until he would raise his head and call out to Naruto. Naruto, Naruto. Then, like always, Tsunade would groan in frustration and say, he's still not talking to either of you, she said, more like a statement than a question. But Jiraiya would always reply with a, why not? Then Orochimaru would say, because you left him unconscious at the academy a week ago, the royal-looking boy said matter-of-factly. What? You left him first? Jiraiya yelled, crossing his arms. This time everything was different, as usually Naruto would remain quiet until Tsunade would slap them both in the back of the heads. Would you both shut up? It still doesn't get rid of the fact that you both left me there. You're lucky Tsunade returned to pick me up, hours later, the male blonde said, finally talking. The two other boys looked down sheepishly, while Tsunade grinned in apparent victory. By now Hiruzen appeared. Are you ready for another day of hard training? He asked, grinning sadistically. At that all four children groaned in pain. Sensei, can we take a break from training? I'm still sore from yesterday's exercise. Jiraiya said. Hiruzen chuckled. Oh come on, you should know my response by now. He said. Yeah, the soreness will go away with more training. You know Sensei, that isn't true. More training just makes me more sore. Tsunade said, pouting with her arms crossed. Hiruzen frowned for a second. Well, it's a good thing we aren't training today, we have a mission, he said, chuckling at their gasps of happiness. Really, Sensei? Naruto said, appearing at Hiruzen's side faster than anybody could see. What is it? What is it? What is it? He repeated the question a dozen times before Tsunade covered his mouth with her hand. Calm down, Baka. He would have told us already, if you weren't talking, she said, struggling to keep Naruto still as he was thrashing around. Grab his legs, she told Orochimaru and Jiraiya. At that they tried to hold his legs down, but Naruto went and kicked Jiraiya in the chin and Orochimaru in the side of the head. Then he substituted himself for Jiraiya, gasping for breath. Damn, you got a grip on you, Su-chan, he said, rubbing his jaw. Tsunade let Jiraiya go, feeling that he wasn't thrashing, and was glaring at Naruto. As soon as Jiraiya was let go, he sped towards Naruto. Sarutobi grabbed the back of his collar. Calm down, Jiraiya-kun. Naruto-kun didn't mean to kick you in the chin, he said, looking at Orochimaru to see him out cold. Damn, Naruto, you knocked Orochimaru-kun out, looking at Naruto with surprise. The blonde waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, now what this mission? And as Kami is my witness, if it's doing meaningless chores I'm going to kill you, he said with a serious look on his face. Okay, then we have two missions. We have to escort a diplomat to the capital of River Country. Sarutobi said. It's a C-rank escort mission, does that satisfy you? Naruto nodded. The other mission? The blonde asked. Yes, from there, we'll travel near the border of Kase no Kuni and meet up with an informant. Really? A spy? Awesome. Jiraiya said, shooting his arms in the air. Tsunade sighed from her spot beside Orochimaru. She had been looking at his head, making sure nothing was serious despite the outcome. After sighing, she was tossed a bottle smelling salts by Hiruzen. Orochimaru shot up. Oh, that stinks. My head, he said, moaning in pain. Okay, now that Orochimaru's up, how about we get ready for those missions? Naruto said, leaving in a shunshin, only to return a second later. Where do we meet up? XXX 20 minutes later XXX. Naruto sat at a dango stand. He had been sitting there for the past 10 minutes. He had about 30 sticks of dango beside him. He leaned back, rubbing his stomach full of sweet dango. Ah, that was the best dango I've ever had. What's your secret, Amy-chan? He told the daughter of the shopkeeper. Naruto-kun, you know I can't give you the secret, even if you want to work here, she said, cutting him off. Amy was a young girl similar to Ayame. She had short blue hair and light purple eyes. She was only 8 years old and helped her mother with the dango stand. She wore a frilly dark purple dress and an apron over it. Though she was 2 years older than Naruto, she was shorter than him, by only about an inch or two. Just like between Ayame and Naruto, Amy and Naruto treated each other like siblings. Her mother adored Naruto and he would constantly walk her to and from school, protect her from bullies, and he even gave her a couple of lessons in hand-to-hand combat, to better protect herself while he wasn't present. Ah, come on, Amy-chan, just give me part of the recipe and I'll think of the rest. No. Yes. No. Yes. I promise I won't tell anybody. Don't you have a mission to go to? The brunette said, crossing her arms. Oh shit. Naruto said, tossing money on the counter before vanishing with a shunshin. Amy collected the money on the counter, shaking her head. I'm so telling mom. The blue-eyed boy ran through the streets. It was way bigger and more populated than he was used to. He was running so fast that he was surprised to find himself stationary, at 2 feet in the air, with his legs in front of him. Whoa, what's happening? He thought, quickly righting himself and landing on his feet. He could feel somebody's hand clutching his collar. The blonde looked to the right and followed the cream-colored hand to a dark red sleeve of what he already knew was going to be an elaborate and royal kimono. He continued to travel up the sleeve and noticed the kimono had a high collar. And continuing, he realized that seal tags were hanging from a hairpin that was holding the bun of a beautiful woman. She also had 3 clips keeping her bangs out of her eyes. He went back to the tags and with a more analytical gaze, he couldn't remotely understand what the seal was. I see you have an interest in fuinjutsu, not unlikely in an Uzumaki child. Naruto heard his mother gasp in his head, Mito-sama, Naruto, you be on your best behavior. The blue-eyed boy heard his mother tell him. The genin gulped for no apparent reason, finding it necessary to be respectful and no thinking like a fox. Are you Uzumaki Mito-sama? He asked. I am, and please no sama, you'll make me feel old, she said smiling. So humble. Okay, now how do I ask this without sounding a tad bit disrespectful? He thought, thinking for a quick second. No disrespect, Mito-san, but why are you holding onto my collar? She smirked and let him go. Because I have the skill to. I have much to talk to you about, Uzumaki Naruto. I'll be waiting when you return from your mission. Come to my manor. I'm sure you'll find the way without asking anybody, she said, turning and walking away. Naruto was left in the middle of the dirt street, speechless about what just happened. Oh, what just happened? Just because he was speechless doesn't mean he was thoughtless. You just met Mito-sama. She was and always will be the strongest wielder of the Rinnegan since the Sage of Six Paths. She was also the first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Kushina said, dropping a bomb. Naruto just raised an eyebrow as he walked to the south gate, knowing he would be there in a couple of minutes. So you were the second and me, the third. I wonder why the fox never told me this. He thought. You're not mad that I never told you I was the second container of the kitsune? I knew that piece of information. The only question I have, now, is why is the Kyuubi gone? If I'm correct, Mito-san, and you both have the Rinnegan, and yet the Kyuubi was still in you, and not gone. But with me the fox is gone. He thought. Ask Mito-sama. I'm sure you can trust her with information like this. Kushina asked. Are you sure? If I ask her that, then I would have to say I'm from the future, and that would only raise further questions. Just trust me on this one. Now pay attention or you'll end up walking into the gate, the redhead said. Naruto's eyes had been blurry while talking with his mother, and they cleared up just in time to see the grains in the wall. He stopped immediately and released a sigh in relief. Backing up, he turned around. I can't believe none of you would have stopped me, he said, looking at his team. Tsunade laughed. I told you he wouldn't hit the wall. You both owe me 50 ryo, she said, holding out her hands. Whoa, Tsunade won a bet. Naruto thought, looking around. Is the world ending? Who's going to die? While the Uzumaki was panicking, Sarutobi looked at his team. Alright, you're going to have to wait a moment while I go and get the Kawa River diplomat. He's 10 minutes late. He muttered the last part. XXX 3 hours later, XXX. The 5-unit team and the diplomat have been walking for 3 hours, and even though they covered quite a distance, having been in river country for little over 30 minutes, the boredom was painful. Orochimaru passed the boredom with a book in hand, but even reading was starting to get a little boring. Jiraiya and the diplomat was walking in the front, while Orochimaru and Tsunade was walking in the middle with Naruto and Hiruzen was walking behind. It was a classic pair strategy. The worst part about the boredom was that Jiraiya didn't know how to shut up. He was talking to the diplomat. So do you have a hidden weapon in case you get in trouble while in your own country? What do you have for breakfast every morning? Is it dangerous to go swimming in your rivers? The questions he was asking were all over the place, never staying on a single topic. The diplomat was a heavy-set man, with a dark blue eccentric kimono. It looked like a baby put it together. Pieces of it was cut into triangles, like the sleeves, the torso was a giant circle, and the obi was a giant rectangle. The kimono wasn't the only thing eccentric about the man, he too was talkative and would laugh at everything Jiraiya said. Of course the rivers are dangerous, you don't want to be eaten by alligators, do you? He said laughing, his huge belly shaking with each ha. You would think the man would get tired of answering the amount of questions he was being asked, was the thought of the other 4 members of the team. Naruto looked around, becoming paranoid for some reason. He had experienced that every time he was on a supposed C-rank escort mission it always turned out to be a higher rank. He activated his Rinnegan and looked around for any sign of a chakra signature. He realized there was about 3 bodies of chakra nearby. Can you see them? They're hiding their chakra signature pretty well, but your eyes should be able to see them clearly. Hiruzen whispered to Naruto. Yeah, I can see them. The nature of their chakra are 2 winds and an earth. Obvious village origin would be Suna. The level of the chakra, I'm guessing 3 chunins. He said, his eyes glowing a light gray in the sun. I guess they are trying to rid the world of the professor, but I doubt they can even scratch you, the Rinnegan wielding boy said, smirking. Let them handle it. He said, pointing at Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru. I'll protect the client, just in case the enemy gets desperate. He said, not even giving Hiruzen a chance to reply before doing a fast and short whistle. At that Orochimaru and the others grew more attentive. With that whistle they knew that trouble was near and they needed to be ready. Orochimaru put away his book and Jiraiya stopped asking meaningless questions. What's wrong with you, boy? Don't you have any more questions? The man asked as Jiraiya slowly looked around. Naruto walked up to the other side of the client. Don't worry, he's just getting ready. Ready? Getting ready for what? At that 3 figures shot out from the foliage headed straight for Hiruzen. The future Sannin also burst into action, each going after a single target, intent on protecting their sensei. XXX Orochimaru vs. First Chunin XXX. Orochimaru appeared in front of the man, punching him in the chest, in the process. I won't allow you to get any closer to my sensei, he said, taking out a pair of kunai. The Chunin's feet slid along the ground, because he didn't fall, he held his chest staring at the kid in front of him. What the hell, you're just a kid, how did you even know we were here? Orochimaru smiled. Don't worry about that, he said, running forward. The brown-haired Chunin threw a couple of kunai, only to see them being deflected by the little kid. After deflecting the thrown projectiles, Orochimaru slid under the man, cutting in the man's thighs. The man was lucky enough to substitute himself for a log. He reappeared over Orochimaru, doing a set of hand signs, futon, datapa. Great breakthrough. Orochimaru quickly jumped away, doing his own hand seals. Nothing apparently happened. Ha, a dud, you shouldn't have pretended to be a ninja kid, you would have lived longer, he said before he noticed another Orochimaru inches away from him. He swung and it went past him. A bunshin, he thought before he quickly realized he was in a genjutsu and quickly dispelled it. When he came to reality, Orochimaru's foot was literally an inch from his face. The kick wasn't all that powerful, but when Orochimaru dropped to the floor and punched him in the solar plexus, the single punch was strong enough to make him hiccup, and that was it. He jumped back before he could get hit again. The kid's fast, I'll give him that. It's time to get serious, the brown-haired Chunin thought, doing a pair of hand seals. Let's see if you can take this. Futon. Repusho. Gale Wind Palm. Orochimaru was quick enough to do his own hand seals and slam them on the floor. Doden. Doryu Heki, Earth-style wall, he said as a wall of earth rose up from the ground in time to block the Gale Palm. Thank you, sensei, for this technique, he thought, feeling the technique stay intact. The Chunin frowned when he seen the wall withstand his gale palm. He rushed the wall, knowing the brat was hiding behind it. He went through a couple of hand seals and took a deep breath. Futon. Atsugai. Pressure damage, he breathed out and the wall was immediately destroyed, but Orochimaru was nowhere to be seen. The unnamed Chunin looked around for his target, before he felt hands grab his ankles and drag him down into the earth, until only his head remained above the ground. With that finished, two Orochimarus rose up from the ground. I'm glad I created a clone, it was hard to pull you underground, even with it, he said, panting as he dispelled his earth clone. I can't believe I lost to this brat, the man thought as his head dropped in shame. XXX Tsunade vs. Second Chunin. XXX. Tsunade appeared over the second male Chunin. She grabbed his head and twisted her body and connected both of her feet on the man's chest, knocking him back. She wasted little time because before she even landed on the floor she was throwing 3 kunai. The first connected with the man's shoulder, the second, the man's other shoulder, and the third, hit the man's left kidney. The man was saved from death, however, when he substituted right before the last kunai pierced his skin, now replaced by a log. The man was surprised to find that he couldn't move either arm. You little bitch, how did you do this? He asked, his voice dripping with venom. Tsunade smirked at the comment. I pierced a cluster of nerves on each of your upper arms. In layman's terms, I permanently paralyzed your arms when I ripped those nerves apart, she said, running forward with a pair of kunai in her hands. Before the man could even move, she threw the kunai right at his feet, or should I say through his feet. The man screamed in pain and Tsunade appeared behind him, with a kunai at his throat ready to cut into at any moment. Give me a reason to cut your throat, I dare you, Suna scum, she said. XXX Jiraiya vs. Third Chunin. XXX. Jiraiya threw a kunai, hitting the last Chunin in the thigh, forcing the man to fall to the ground. Jiraiya then jumped, intent on landing on the man's back. He didn't expect the man to quickly roll over, using the momentum of his leg to knock Jiraiya out of the air and sending him far into the forest. When Naruto seen this, he dashed forward, not to save Jiraiya, but to hurry up and end the man. With his eyes he could see a massive amount of chakra focusing at the man's mouth. He appeared in front of his sensei and held out his hands, just as the man exhaled his futon, Kazakiri, wind cutter. Right before everyone's eyes the technique was absorbed right into Naruto's hands. After the absorption was complete, Naruto dropped to his knees, panting in mild exhaustion. That first test went better than I had thought, he thought, looking at his hands and seeing all the cuts. I would have liked to test it against a water technique though, he thought, getting up. Hiruzen looked shocked at the blonde silver. Naruto-kun, you can tell me what just happened later. Now I would like to know what's happening with your hair, he said, casually throwing a kunai at the Chunin's head. After deactivating his Rinnegan, he looked at Sarutobi with confusion all over his face. What do you mean? What happened to my hair? He asked comically, looking up at the strands of his hair. Part of it's turning silver. I've noticed the past week that your blondness was losing its golden sheen and gaining a little silvery sheen. But I always thought it was the sun, Tsunade said, walking up to him after tying her captive up, and looking at his hair. At this, Naruto began thinking about stuff. This might be related to a lot of things, the color of my chakra, the disappearance of the Kyuubi a year ago, or my Rinnegan in general. Whatever it is, how come I haven't noticed anything in the past year? Naruto thought before a realization came to him. Would all of you quit examining my hair? He said, slapping Tsunade's hand that was holding a lock of silver. After that he walked over to the paralyzed and bound Chunin. Tsunade fought. What is the reason for attacking this group? He asked the Chunin. The man spit on the ground nearby. I'm not telling you anything, Konoha scum. The hair-changing genin thought for a moment, before taking out a kunai. You see this kunai? He asked before that same kunai was found in the other Chunin's chest, with Naruto's arms still outstretched. The same will happen to you, if you decide to try my patience. The Chunin scoffed. He was weak anyway, he lost to that brat over there. He deserved to die. He said. You lost to a girl, what does that say about you? Hey, what is that supposed to mean? Tsunade said behind Naruto. Naruto looked behind him to see Tsunade with her arms crossed. Can we continue this some other time? I'm sort of busy extracting information. Oh, we'll continue this alright, she said, walking back to her sensei and Orochimaru. Naruto looked back at his captive with a frown on his face. Just tell me the real reason, he said, digging into his pouch, pulling out another kunai. Fine, I'll tell you, he said, looking at the ground, before looking back up at Naruto with a smug look. My team was assigned to take out the proclaimed professor of Khan. Bullshit, Naruto said, grabbing the man's head. You know damn well, if your village even wanted to put a scratch on Sensei, they would have sent an elite team of Dunes. No, something is wrong with this picture, he said, reactivating his Rinnegan and taking a deep breath. The others stood there as confusion as the man's eyes grew wider than they could possibly imagine, but they themselves couldn't see anything. Now I'm going to ask you again, what is your prime objective? My team was more of scouting, lookout, extended border kind of squad. We were making sure nobody was on their way to Suna. Naruto looked at him funny. You're not making sense. What is Suna planning? An attack on Konoha, cutting through Aim no Kuni and attacking the village in the cover of night from their north flank, the man answered. The genin waited for a while, and when he noticed the man not dropping dead, he nodded. That appears to be the truth. So Suna's planning to cut through Aim no Kuni and invading the village from our north flank. It's smart, we wouldn't be expecting an invasion so early in the war. Naruto said, looking behind him to see a large head surrounded by purple flames. Its mouth was wide open and his hand-like tongue was out holding the man's tongue. Looking higher into the giant head's eyes, you can see the Rinnegan. When is this invasion going to happen? I don't know the exact day it's going to happen, I just know that it's not going to happen for a long time. It could be weeks, months, or even years. The ghetto, our outer path, discerned that the man was telling the truth and let go of his tongue, forcing the man to begin gasping for breath, seemingly out of energy and completely exhausted. With its job done, the ghetto returned into the ground, going back from whence it came. Naruto stood up, his Rinnegan still activated. Ghetto, may have spared you, but I want, he said, throwing the kunai at the man's head, while deactivating his bloodline, before he looked back at his team and seeing their scared looks. Sarutobi looked at Naruto with a frown on his face. It was obvious that at times Naruto acted more than his age and thought more maturely, but to actually act more ruthless. Now that was scary for everyone to see. Tsunade looked as Naruto not only killed one, but two people just to get information out of somebody. She was terrified of the boy, maybe his bloodline was making him this way. Orochimaru, on the other hand, looked positively fascinated at how resourceful the Rinnegan was. It had the ability to extract information out of somebody with just a simple glare. It was possibly better than the even more mysterious Sharingan, and with no doubt, better than the Byakugan. Truly amazing. Naruto's mind went a mile a minute, thinking of how he could explain what just happened. Where's Jiraiya? He asked, looking around for the boy. This got everybody out of their terrified trance, as they begun looking for the lost boy. Naruto sighed as he walked into the forest. You have to be careful when you act ruthless like that. You're supposed to be a new, wet behind the ears, but with better skills, 6-year-old genin. Kushina scolded her son. But amazing completion of 2 ocular techniques. You'll no doubtingly be powerful if you keep this up. Not stronger than me, of course, but yeah, you'll have power. Naruto could hear the smugness in her voice. He rolled his eyes while heading straight for Jiraiya's position. He could obviously see a strange and yet somehow familiar kind of chakra signature disappear and reappear over there. So if he knew his sensei's history, he wanted to waste as much time as possible. XXX Kawa no Kuni capital XXX. The four genin sat outside of a building where Hiruzen was talking with the diplomat, most likely getting thanked and receiving a personal reward for the mission. The dual-colored genin sat twiddling his thumbs waiting for the start of the second mission. His teammates, save Jiraiya, has been avoiding making eye contact ever since his interrogation, and thanks to his first childhood he needed some kind of attention. He turned his attention to Jiraiya. So Jiraiya, something amazing happened to you recently, huh? He asked. Jiraiya couldn't resist nodding. It sure did, he said, whispering into Naruto's ear, and the more that was whispered the more Jiraiya seemed to grin. The grin was contagious and Naruto became grinning. Congratulations are in order, but why are you keeping it a secret? Jiraiya just shook his head and pointed to Sarutobi, who was walking out of the building. Now that that's settled, I believe we have another mission to complete, he said, bending backwards to crack his back. We can finally speed up the pace, so remember your tree climbing exercise and follow me, he said, hopping to the rooftops and blasting into the nearby forest, with his team following. XXX Konohagakure, Hokage office, XXX. Tobarama sat in his chair holding a piece of paper, sent by his prized student and his team. So Suna, when are you going to attack? He thought to himself. It was obvious that he should up his defenses everywhere, instead of just focusing on the north, just in case the team was meant to be caught and gave away false information. Also, to strengthen his defenses in one spot would only weaken his defenses in another. He came to the decision to keep his defenses the way they were, and when the time came to meet Suna head-on, in aim, fighting would not occur in Hai no Kuni at all. I'll have to thank Hiruzen for this information, I'll give him something special pretty soon, he said, looking at a picture of his brother on the wall. Something's going to happen to me soon, I just have to be prepared and take the initiative to make sure this village has a strong leader to lead it to victory, he thought, again looking at his broken teacup. XXX Omake Jiraiya's time alone. XXX. Jiraiya flew through the forest, before his body collided with something hard and yet furry. OWW. He said, sliding on the furry thing. He heard a roar and immediately jumped off the thing. He turned and seen a bear, as tall as him. He screamed as the bear swung at him. He jumped over the swing, landing on the bear's head, and kicking off of it, landing in front of what he believed to be a frog. What in the world, what's a frog doing fighting a bear? He questioned out loud. I'm not a frog, I'm a toad, the amphibian said, surprising Jiraiya. Jiraiya wasn't given the chance to feint as the bear attacked again. He and the toad jumped away from the strike. You know you're pretty big for a toad. Jiraiya commented the toad's size. Really? I never noticed, the toad said, hopping at the bear and kicking him in the chest. Wow, that was fast. You're not a regular toad, are you? Jiraiya asked as the toad landed near him. Really? What gave that away? The toad asked sarcastically. Well, first of all, you're very rude, Jiraiya said, running at the bear, and after ducking under said bear's strike he threw a kunai at it. He missed when the bear dropped to all fours. Oh please, the toad said, if you were attacked by a bear, you'll be rude to whoever's around you too, it said, hopping over the bear's charge. So do you, croak a ribbit. The toad looked at him like he was stupid, before he chuckled. You know what, I like you, kid, he said, putting a webbed hand on the Jiraiya's head. Ah, that's nasty, he said, moving from under the webbed hand. How about after the battle, you sign the toad contract, the toad offered. Jiraiya's eyes widened at the offer and he quickly did a sequence of hand seals, Kaden, and in fireball. The fireball hit the bear straight in its chest and it screamed in pain and headed for the nearby river and jumped in. You're a summoned toad? He asked, nearly screaming it in excitement. The toad only stared in awe at how quick the little kid got rid of the bear. Yes, I am. So that's why you can talk, Jiraiya said, slapping his forehead. And you're giving me a chance to sign your contract, Sweet Cammy, this is the best first mission in my life, he said, falling on his back. At that, the toad disappeared and a second later reappeared with a scroll in hand. He hopped to Jiraiya and tripped, the scroll flying and landed on Jiraiya's stomach. Ah! He screamed in surprise at the large scroll. This thing is huge, he said, looking at the red toad. What's your name anyway? Jiraiya said, unrolling the scroll and properly signing the scroll with the toad's instruction. 5-unit team continued to tree hop through the forest. Naruto watched his sensei's back, wondering why he hasn't talked to him about the incident yet. He probably isn't talking to me, because it's war, and being heartless to your enemies is a must, he thought as the team dropped to the ground. Okay team, there's a village up ahead. Put away your forehead protectors, just in case there's another Tsunade team in this village, he said, causing the kids to take the forehead protectors off of their heads. What are you going to do, sensei? You're known throughout the elemental nations, Orochimaru said beside him. Hiruzen looked down at Orochimaru. Don't worry about me, just enjoy yourselves, he said, disappearing in a leafy whirlwind. Enjoy ourselves? What does he mean by that? Jiraiya said as everybody shrugged. Naruto walked ahead. I think I know what he means, he said before he ran with the others following them. The 4 children arrived at the village to see it packed with nothing but people and festival stands. They all looked at the event in amazement. What do you think they're celebrating for? Tsunade asked out loud. Who cares? Naruto said with a smile on his face as he looked at all 3 of his teammates. Let's have fun, he said, running to any fun stand. XXX with Hiruzen XXX. Hiruzen was crouching on a rooftop, overlooking his team. He smiled when they forgot about fighting in this war to have some fun. After watching them run off, he stood to his full height and vanished again. This time he reappeared in an alley. He walked out of the alley and around the festival, on the lookout for his spy. He said he would be where one wins in threes. Where could that be? He thought, looking around. After 20 minutes of just walking around, he noticed a casino. Of course, a casino. He's near the slot machines, he thought, walking in the casino. After browsing for a minute or two, he noticed a man sitting at a slot machine looking nervous. He had black hair, a goatee, and a coin in his hand. He walked by and whispered, "Follow me." After Sarutobi walked by and was gone for a couple of seconds, the man got up and did just that. After 20 minutes of being tailed while walking in the village, the professor exited the village and waited for his tailing spy. Minutes passed by and the man walked into the darkened clearing. He had his left hand in his pocket and his right was flipping the same coin he had at the casino. Nice of you to show up, Lucky, Tsuruboy said, seeing the man. The man was called Lucky because he had this single coin that would always win at slots. But it wasn't just the coin, he was just a lucky guy. The man chuckled. It was kind of difficult to trail you, you know. I guess I'm just lucky enough not to be followed while following you, he said, chuckling one more time. Sarutobi dryly looked at the man as he sort of joked about his lucky skills. Can we get to business? He asked, pushing himself off the tree. Lucky instantly grew serious and stopped flipping his coin. Sure we can, he said as he began to reveal Suna's invasion plans and other secrets. XXX with Naruto 10 minutes later. XXX, currently playing a game of darts, was our time-traveling blonde. He had his last dart in his hand. He looked at the wall in front of him to see 3 more balloons left for him to pop. It didn't matter as he only needed to pop one to get his prize, a little water dragon plushie toy. You got one last dart to go, little boy. Are you ready? The owner of the stand said, smiling at Naruto. Naruto grinned and nodded his head, and looked at the board again. He took a deep breath and threw his dart, and like the other 2, it was a perfect throw that popped the balloon. The bystanders that was watching clapped as Naruto happily jumped up and down. He was handed his plushy toy and he immediately and happily skipped away, clutching his toy to his chest. If any of your teammates see you like this, they wouldn't even recognize you. Kushina commented on her son's behavior. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. I don't care, I'm too happy. He was interrupted from thinking as he bumped into somebody. He and his new plushy toy dropped to the ground. Well, would you look at the runt and his little toy? Some 12-year-old bully said, picking up said toy. His other two, 12-year-old friends, laughed at the frown on Naruto's face. Hey, give that back, Naruto said, getting up. Why don't you make me? He said, pushing Naruto. The silvery blonde stumbled back a little before he charged at the kid. He was stopped when the other bullies grabbed his arms. Where do you think you're going? One of the bullies said. Naruto stared as the lead bully walked away laughing at his prize. This will make a great gift for my little sister, he said, laughing some more. Naruto, don't you remember that you're not a regular kid? You can fight them, you know. Kushina said. Realization dawned on Naruto's face. Oh yeah. He thought as he easily ripped his arms free and in seconds dropped the two bullies with simple and fast strikes. The lead bully turned around to call his friends when he noticed they were on the floor, with the little brat not in sight. Hey, how'd you guys get on the floor? He asked, jogging to his friends. One of the dropped bullies groaned. That kid, he's a monster, he said between groans of pain. What? A monster? He's just a little brat, he said. You should not have taken what was mine. The bully heard a voice from behind him. But when he looked behind him, he didn't see anybody, which was strange with the festival going on. Now I have to punish you. This time Naruto was standing right in front of the bully, causing said bully to scream in fear. XXX 10 seconds later XXX. Naruto was, yet again, clutching onto his plushy toy as he skipped along the dirt path. If you looked behind him, you could see the pile of beaten-up bodies of the three bullies. The 6-year-old smiled when he looked at the full moon above. Tonight is such a beautiful night, he muttered. I knew you weren't a regular Gaki, a voice said behind Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened. I didn't even sense him, he thought to himself as he slowly turned his head to see a medium-sized male. And judging from his flak jacket and the headband, he was a Suna Junin. What's a Junin from Suna doing in Kawa no Kuni? He shakily asked, feeling the amount of ki the man was directing toward him. His instincts told him to run, and not to stop, until he found Sensei. Naruto remembered the guy from the history books. He was the famed Kase no Kami. His real name was never known. Even though he only looked to barely be around the age of 18, the blonde was positive about the identity of this man. Naruto knew was that this man was defeated by the Orochimaru after he and his team received their titles. He also knew that he was famous for his ruthlessness in wind techniques and being the first one to properly use shape manipulation to form a dragon's body. Naruto also the man already had his skills, by the small emblem of a wind dragon on the right side of his flak jacket. I don't have to answer you, he simply said, taking a step. As soon as he took a step, Naruto's instincts got tired of being ignored and took control of his body. The blonde then bolted into the nearby forest, his Rinnegan on full blast as he looked for his sensei's chakra signature. Kase smirked as he watched the kid run. Let's begin this little chase, he thought, also running into the forest. Naruto continued pumping his little legs. This is crazy, where the hell is Sensei at? He screamed in his head. The man appeared in front of Naruto, forcing the blonde to drop to the ground below. It's been fun, these last 5 minutes of chasing you, but I've grown bored. You're going to fight me now and I'm not giving you that choice, he said, blurring out of sight. Naruto thought fast, and since he had no idea where the man was going to strike from, he did a technique he learned from one of his father's scrolls. Futon. Tatsumaki no Shoheki. Tornado barrier, he said, rapidly spinning, creating a tornado that repelled the man when he struck. The man bounced back a few meters. You would have expected a frown to wrinkle his face, but a large grin was in place. Excellent. A wind element, like me. And you did a rather unique technique. I bet it was derived from your village's Hyuga clan, no? He said, standing to his feet. At that point Naruto stopped spinning and looked at the man. Just like you told me, I don't have to answer you. He said, activating his Rinnegan. Let's just get this over with. If I'm lucky, I'll defeat you in time to get another toy, he said, glaring at the man. Kase just grinned at the little threat. He was rather surprised to see that the kid's eyes changed in design. He scoffed in his mind, leaf bastards always getting the good stuff. Naruto quickly bent back, when the Tsunade nearly took off his head with another strike. Doing a quick handstand backflip, he went through a series of hand seals. Let's see if this works. Futon, Kazaryu. Wind dragon, he thought, breathing out a wind dragon. Kase stood shocked at witnessing a technique he created not 2 months ago. He didn't even have time to question the amazement of the technique before he was hit with it. Naruto stared in surprise when his plan actually worked. That actually worked. I can't believe it, he thought. Keep attacking. Don't stop your assault. The blonde heard his mother yell. He quickly ran forward, spotting his opponent with his back against a tree. Futon. Kami Oroshi. Diving wind from the mountains, he called out as a swirling vortex collided with Kase's body, breaking the tree behind it. Naruto jumped into the tree tops and did another set of hand seals. Raiden, Gion. False darkness, he did a lightning technique instead, seeing as he traveled faster than wind. Although the technique traveled fast, Kase regained his bearings fast enough to escape imminent doom. Naruto looked to his side to see Kase on the same branch. You're going to tell me how you've completed that technique? A technique I just created. He yelled, moving fast enough to kick Naruto in the side and making him fly through the forest. The Junin didn't even wait until Naruto was a few feet away before he did a sequence of hand seals. Futon. Kazar Yu. He yelled, blowing the dragon straight at the airborne blonde. Currently the blonde's eyes were clenched shut in pain as he flew through the air. He opened them in time to see the dragon a couple feet away from him. He looked behind to see a tree. At that time slowed down, and he moved in slow motion. His eyes focused on the dragon in front and the tree behind at each look. And in a feat of aerobatic, Naruto righted himself in the air and thrust his hands outward. Time returned to normal and the wind dragon in front of Naruto and the approaching tree was destroyed by an invisible force. Naruto was left suspended in air as this was happening. Also, by the look in his eyes, he was unaware about what he was doing. Kase looked dumbfounded as he witnessed Naruto drop to the forest floor. What the hell was that? He mumbled, still looking at the blonde. Naruto groaned as he rubbed his head. What the hell was that? He mumbled, looking around him, seeing everything pushed outwards. What the hell happened to the forest? He asked, still not understanding what happened. You did Shinra Tensei. Almighty push. You recognize a technique that was used against you, but when you do it, you don't know what the hell happened. Kushina mused in her son's head. The dual-colored genin looked into the treetops, straight at Kase. If I can do that, then I can definitely defeat this bozo. He mused to himself as he stopped his movement for a couple of seconds. Kase continued to look at the blonde, still wondering what the hell just happened with the area and how the hell he did that. He continued to think on this when he noticed the blonde stop moving, completely. He rose an eyebrow. Time to end this. He thought, knowing it wasn't a good idea for the blonde to continue whatever it was he was doing. He jumped off the branch, after going through a series of hand seals. Futon. Kase no Hubby. Wind snake, he blew out his second shape manipulation creation. The snake coursed through the forest, dodging the broken trees and branches. After clearing a way straight to Naruto, the snake opened its maw and crashed into Naruto. Kase landed on the forest floor the same time the snake collided into the genin. He smirked when he noticed the blonde not put up any kind of defense. That was easier than I thought it would be, he said, crossing his arms and looking at the destruction his snake caused. He was outrightly shocked when, after the dirt cloud cleared, Naruto was standing holding his arm out, without any visual damage to his body. Naruto kept his eyes closed as he took a deep breath. Although his eyes were closed, you could notice that there was a reddish-orange pigmentation around his eyelids. Naruto exhaled his deep breath and opened his eyes, showing a weird, and somewhat, morphed visage of the Rinnegan. With the exception of the pigmentation around the eyes and the horizontal slit of the pupil, nothing else gave away that Naruto had entered Sage mode. I think it's about time I bust this out of storage, Naruto said, leering at Kase. Since I'm sure this is the last round, I would like to know your name. Naruto asked, too busy looking around the forest, not believing the feeling his new set of eyes. Kase nodded as he began to walk towards Naruto. I guess it's only fair to know the man that's going to end your short life. My name is Arashi, and yours? He asked. Naruto's eyes focused on the man, shocking him with the new additions. My name, Naruto said softly, chuckling, since, during this time, his full name didn't really have any effect. My name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, he said, looking at Arashi's face to see if his name had any apparent effect. It didn't as Arashi uncrossed his arms. Well then, I guess it's time to get this round over with. Right when Naruto dashed at him, he tilted his head in time to avoid a punch, but was surprised when he was flying backwards. What the F? He thought, crashing into a tree. The sage extended his arm towards the rubble. A Rasengan began forming in his left hand. He held that arm with his right to keep it balanced. The ball of spiraling chakra began shrinking to the size of a marble. Rasendangan. Spiral bullet, he said as his right hand continued to keep the left stabilized and dead center, so to speak. With that in the process, he began charging chakra behind the bullet, in preparation to push the bullet. Seconds later, he completed the charge and it pushed the spiraling bullet toward the little pile of destroyed forestry, with such speed, a blink of the eye was all it took to travel from Naruto's palm to said pile. You would think that he only made the Rasengan smaller to better hit Arashi through all of the broken tree. But that wasn't a problem at all. Because Naruto, who still retained a semblance of control over the little orb, snapped his fingers and released all of the condensed chakra the little bullet had, just as he released the bullet. And everything after that was a flash of white. XXX. Back at the village XXX. Hiruzen finished his meeting with his informant. He looked at Jiraiya with a stern gaze. Next time you want to spy on someone, make sure you can't be detected, he said. Jiraiya had the decency to look sheepish. Sorry, sensei. I only wanted to see how a meeting like that worked, he said before being hit by Tsunade. You idiot, that spy guy could have killed you, if Hiruzen wasn't there to stop him from acting, she said, scolding him like he was a kid. Oh wait, he is a kid. Orochimaru shook his head. Next time I say stop trying to look for sensei, I suggest you stop trying to look for sensei. Hiruzen looked at the trio. How did you find me in the first place? He asked, curious. Jiraiya shrugged, not having any idea how he found his sensei. I guess I got lucky, he said. Hiruzen just sighed loudly and shook his head. What am I going to do with you for? He asked himself. Wait, for? He asked again, mentally counting heads. Where's Naruto? He asked out loud. A loud explosion was both heard and the top of it was seen a couple of miles just south of their position. I'm guessing he's over there, Orochimaru said, pointing with his thumb. Hiruzen began realizing that ever since his meeting and adopting of Naruto, he's been sighing and shaking his head more than he can count. He was also beginning to wonder if having Naruto on the squad was such a good idea. He was a danger magnet and you did not want a danger magnet during a war. Okay, let's go. He said, running towards the explosion he knew had to do something with his little adoptive brother. XXX destroyed location XXX. Naruto let out a whistle, while on the edge of the crater. Said crater was a quarter-mile in diameter and 10 feet deep. It would be about the same kind of destruction that his Rasen Shuriken would cause if it dug into the ground. He looked at his left hand in amazement. The results of the new variation of the Rasengan proved to be quite surprising. The initial result was not supposed to be this destructive, well, not on this level. Between the power of both Sage Mode and the Rinnegan, which the latter would be the one that he worked the Rasengan with, he would have to say that it was too much power at his disposal, and he was the container for the most powerful Biju in the nations. This got him thinking, as he lightly scratched his right temple with his index finger. Maybe absorbing the Kyuubi's chakra made his own chakra more potent, and thus his Sage Mode. Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts when he heard coughing nearby. He turned and walked towards the sound. You lived? Naruto asked, seeing Arashi's body, missing both of his legs. It looks like they were blown off at the kneecaps, with blood still pooling around the limbs. In all my years as a ninja, I'm going to have to agree that this is about the second nastiest thing I've ever seen. The first involves sand and crushing, and I really don't want to remind myself, he thought, rapidly shaking his head. I guess this is the end, huh? Naruto was shaken from his thoughts by Arashi talking to him. As I talk, I can feel the life draining from the man said between coughs of blood. Life, he finally said before the life faded from his eyes. Naruto felt his Sage Mode release in the middle of the man's little talk, and now that he was dead, his Rinnegan left as well. There's a myth that says, you're not supposed to look into the dying eyes of the man you killed, or his ghost will forever haunt your soul. What a load of bullshit. If he could remember correctly, he and Sasuke retained eye contact in the final moments of their fight. And he didn't remember ever seeing a ghost of Sasuke anywhere. He scoffed as he dropped a kunai next to the man's head, as a tribute to the fight. That was a great fight, Arashi, the Kazon Kami, he said, walking away from the body and back towards the village. It was at that time that his team dropped in front of him. I told you Naruto had something to do with it. Jiraiya said, pointing Naruto. Come on, Jiraiya. Everybody knew Naruto did something. Tsunade said, substituting Jiraiya's hit on the head to hit Naruto in the head. That's for going off by yourself to fight somebody. Has anyone ever told you, you're a danger magnet? Orochimaru asked. Of course, every mission I've ever been on was never easy. And always jumped up in a rank or two. That's what happens when you're a danger magnet. Naruto thought, mentally rolling his eyes. Who told you I was a danger magnet? Naruto asked, raising his eyebrow. The three kids pointed at their sensei. What? You are a danger magnet. It's like something in you is telling people to fight you. It's not my fault you're like this, he said, holding up his hands. Whatever, can we get back to the festival? It's over. When you caused that explosion, people panicked, closed their stands and went in their houses. Sarutobi said, crossing his arms. We'll have a talk about what happened later, he added. Naruto's eyes widened a little. Oh yeah, I have a talk scheduled with Mito-san after this is over, he thought. Oh, I guess we have to find a new town to rest at, huh? He asked, folding his arms. Sarutobi nodded. That's right, so we better leave now. We're close enough to Tsunade's border that they could be here in minutes, he said, motioning for them to follow him as he jumped away. XXX 2 days later, 7 o'clock, XXX. Naruto and his team finally arrived at the gates of Konoha, after making 2 rest stops. They spent the rest of the night and most of the day, resting after Naruto's fight. Where Naruto told Hiruzen about his encounter with the Kase no Kami, of course leaving out the Sage Mode part and the Rasengan part. Sarutobi thought that he wouldn't be able to be surprised anymore, but he was proven wrong. Decisions were made between them and Naruto reluctantly agreed, feeling that it would be better to like this. Naruto looked to his right to see Tsunade and Jiraiya, and to his left was Orochimaru. He took a deep breath and vanished in a shunshin after being cleared by the gate guardians. Sensei, where's Naruto-kun going? He's probably going to train some more. Don't worry about him, we'll see him tomorrow at the team meeting. Jiraiya said. Now that I think about, I have training of my own, he said, giggling before he began walking away. Jiraiya, wait. Naruto isn't going to be at the meeting tomorrow. Decisions were made and he accepted them. After I get back from the Hokage's office, he'll officially be off the team. Hiruzen said, using a body flicker. The Junin appeared in front of the tall red building and walked in. In no time he appeared in front of the door to his sensei. Nice of you to finally arrive, Hiruzen-kun. I received the news you sent me. Instead of preparing for Suna to invade us, I'll select a large group to meet them in Aim no Kuni. Their wheel battle, Tobirama said, getting straight to the point as Hiruzen entered the room. Hiruzen wasn't surprised, his sensei already devised a plan of action to counteract the invasion plan. I met with my spy from Suna and he informed me about some sensitive information about the path they're going to take from Suna through Aim and into Hai no Kuni. Hiruzen said, sitting down. Did he tell you who's going to lead the invasion? Tobirama asked. The Nadaime Cage. Thank you for the information. It would be better if I lead our forces to battle. I'll leave you in charge of the village while I'm gone. Tobirama said, thinking of possible candidates to take with him to the battle. Sensei, you have to take me with you. Hiruzen said. Sure, I'll take you with me, he said, grabbing a piece of paper. I'm getting a very ominous feeling, Sarutobi. I'm appointing you as my successor for the title of Hokage, he said, handing Hiruzen a piece of paper that stated his accusation. I know it'll be difficult, juggling both the Hokage duties and teaching 4 genins, but I'm positive you can do it. I'm honored, Hokage-sensei, but it'll only be 3 students. 3. Why? What happened? I had a talk with Naruto-kun and he and I decided that he would no longer be a part of the team. Hiruzen explained. Why would you kick him off the team? He's sort of a danger magnet, sensei. Oh, I understand what you mean. Tobirama said, nodding. So Naruto-kun is the equivalent Danzo-san. Hiruzen shrugged. I don't think Naruto has any interest in becoming the Hokage. But they do share similarities in acts of ruthlessness, he commented. Really now, how was Naruto brutal in the last mission? Tobirama asked with a raised eyebrow. With the question asked, Hiruzen went the process of explaining what happened through the entirety of the mission. For someone so small and young, he can cause an enormous amount of destruction. Tobirama nodded. I agree. With his Rinnegan and his ocular abilities, he'll become a dangerous shinobi with more training, he said, thinking about what to do now with the little blonde. I know what I'm going to do with the blonde. I have a couple of choices to do with the blonde. Don't worry about him, just worry about your 3 little genins. Tobirama said, dismissing Hiruzen and resuming his paperwork after talking for 2 hours. XXX with Naruto XXX. It's for the better, Naruto. You would have changed the timeline more if you would have stayed with them. Cheer up. You have to get ready for the meeting with Mito-sama. Kushina said, happy that she'll get to see Mito again. I'm not sad about the whole timeline issue, it's just that, they're my friends and I want to be there to help them. But I shouldn't worry about them, just think about who they become. Of course, Orochimaru becomes obsessed with eyes, Tsunade turns into a badass medic that later turns into a drunken gambler, and Jiraiya, well, he's Jiraiya. But they each become the legendary Sannin. Naruto thought, his frown turning into a smile. Alright, so the way to Mito-sama's place is through this forest here. Kushina said, not paying attention to anything Naruto said. Did you hear a word I said? Naruto accused his mother. No, not really. Now hurry up, she said, rushing Naruto. Naruto sighed and made his way towards Mito's house, following Kushina's every direction. After a minute of walking, Naruto stopped. I think you should go silent for a while, he said, cutting off their shared link. He took a deep breath. Silence. He sighed out before he resumed walking. Not long after he resumed walking, he noticed a faint and barely noticeable shimmering on a nearby tree. What could this be? He muttered, walking up to the tree. He examined the shimmering for a couple of seconds. He covered his hand in chakra and touched the shimmer, dispelling the genjutsu. Under the genjutsu was a seal tag that read, Barrier. Naruto nodded, finding the basic seal to be obvious. He tried to dispel it by tearing off the tag, but it wasn't budging. Didn't I encounter a tag like this before? He thought. He realized that he had, during the search for Gaara. When the Akatsuki took him to a hideout in River Country, the country he just left. So there must be about 4 more of these things. Hopefully what happened to Super Bushy Brow and his team doesn't happen to me, he thought, putting his fingers in the familiar cross seal, causing 4 puffs of smoke to appear around him. All right, you 4, each of you look for another tag and await further orders, he commanded, and they disappeared to complete the task. The dual-haired genin leaned against the tree until his Rinnegan was forced on. Boss, I found the main seal. I think you should wait here, the clone said as his Rinnegan showed Naruto a large rock next to an even larger lake. All right, I know where you're at. Come wait over here. He spoke to his clone through their telepathy, clone link, thingy. He pushed himself off the tree and thought about what just happened. Did I just have a 6 paths of pain moment? I knew I could see through my clone's eyes, but I didn't know if my clone activated his Rinnegan while I didn't have mine activated, that it'll force activation, he thought, contemplating how he could use this to his advantage and disadvantages. He kept his Rinnegan activated as he ran to his clone's previous location. A minute later he landed in front of his destination. Through his own eyes the lake was even more beautiful. He also noticed the same shimmer that was on the tree before. Even with his eyes he couldn't penetrate this genjutsu, which was bewildering. All right, are each of you ready? He asked his clones, looking at 5 separated tags, in 5 separate locations thanks to his Rinnegan. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, he said as they all ripped the tags off at the same time and dispelled themselves. The barrier genjutsu dispelled to reveal a house in the middle of the lake. There was a wooden walkway leading to the door. The house itself was sitting on top of an island big enough to accommodate it and a couple of flower beds. It was 1 story, which was appropriate as it only contained 1 person. He deactivated his dujutsu and walked along the walkway to the house of one of his most powerful ancestors. As he was walking he began to slow down. Why do I feel like I've been through this before? He asked himself before a tornado of water rose up from the lake, going to a total of 30 feet in the air. It began taking form as it moved to surround the house, and as it finished forming, Naruto finally found it to be a dragon. It was a long blue Chinese dragon, with the body being 30 feet long, from what he could estimate. Let's see which one you possess, the dragon growled out as he waited for Naruto's retaliation. Naruto was still shocked at seeing the dragon, only faintly hearing what it said. He studied the dragon in front of him. He knew it wasn't a regular water dragon technique, as those don't talk. So the only logical choice was that it was a summon. Which clarified everything that he had to question about the beast. Wait, which one I possess? He asked as the dragon got tired of waiting and launched forward. Naruto's eyes widened as the dragon came at him quickly. He jumped to the side and the dragon crashed into the walkway, destroying it. The dual-haired genin found himself on top of the water. Damn, I am a danger magnet, he thought, crying anime tears. Despite being on water, Naruto felt it rumble. Listening to his instincts, he jumped in the air. That was a stupid thing to do, as the dragon was still under him. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique, Naruto said as a clone formed in front of him. Naruto slapped the clone in the back, and used him as a platform to jump to the side. The doppelganger was engulfed by the blue reptile. Naruto landed on the lake and smirked. Katsu, he said as the exploding tag he slapped on the clone exploded. And with the clone, the dragon followed, its head exploded into hundreds of little droplets of water. Naruto looked at the droplets of water suspiciously. It was weird how they just floated there. He began to notice them hardening and sharpening, and that's when they fell fast. The genin dodged the ones he could and used a kunai to deflect the ones he couldn't. Dodging and deflecting was beginning to get tiring. Tatsumaki no Shoheki, he said, spinning as a tornado circled around him. Of course, on top of water, a tornado is a hurricane, as the water mixes in with the wind. The hurricane was enough to repel the shards of ice. Naruto stopped spinning when yet again he felt the water rumble. This time he jumped to the side, already in the process of hand seals. Raiden. Gi wait. Naruto said, cutting off the technique. Either the lightning will weaken it, or it'll strengthen it. Can I take that chance? He asked himself, still facing the dragon. How do I defeat this thing? He asked himself, before he had a short flashback to the first time he encountered a guardian like this. That could work. He thought, clearing his throat. Stop. He commanded. When he said this, the dragon quickly coiled around Naruto. Not constricting his body, just surrounding. What did you say? The dragon asked menacingly. Naruto repeated his command, waiting for it to be done. The dragon looked at Naruto for a while, before it growled, "Don't tell me what to do." He growled out, preparing to eat Naruto whole. Naruto clenched his eyes and thrust out his arms. Shinra Tensei. The dragon stopped, not because it worked, but because nothing happened. The dragon looked at the Rinnegan-wielding blonde, confused. Did it work? Naruto asked himself, cracking open an eye to see the dragon still there. He opened his eyes fully. What the hell? That's bullshit, he said, not seeing any destruction. I did it once before, he continued to rant about how it was unfair. The dragon kept his reptilian eyes on Naruto, not knowing what to do right now. He watched as the blonde continued to throw his hands everywhere during his rant. Noticing a slight shift in chakra, the dragon engulfed the boy. He opened his mouth, releasing a puff of smoke. He tricked me. It thought, annoyed. Yoo-hoo, Naruto said, waving at the dragon. Not that I'm having fun, but why are you attacking me? He asked, crossing his arms. The dragon scoffed and turned back into water, and returned to the lake. Naruto was left confused and a little ticked off as he deactivated his Rinnegan. "Ah, Naruto-kun, you're so adorable when you're mad," somebody said, pinching Naruto's cheek. Naruto flinched in complete surprise. He turned to see Mito behind him with a smile on her face. I didn't even feel her chakra until she touched me. Naruto thought in surprise. What are you doing here? I live here, Mito said, smiling wider as she pointed to her house. At this, Naruto mentally smacked himself in the head. Wait, why the hell did that dragon attack me? And what did it mean by, which one I possess? Naruto waved his arms around frantically. Whoa, one question at a time. Let's head to the house, while I make you some tea, she said, leading Naruto in the house. Naruto sat on a small couch in a rather large living room. He looked around, and noticed some visible seals on the wall. One looked like a self-projecting genjutsu seal. He didn't know how he knew this, something inside of him told him this. The rest were basic protection seals for the house. He continued to look around the house, until his eyes rested on the table in front of him. It was a prototype for what looked like a gravity seal. Is she making the first gravity seal? It makes sense, since she is a fuinjutsu master. He thought to himself, noticing the kind of gravity seal she was making. Hey, this is interesting, it's a gravity seal. Something's wrong with it, he said, adding some seals and getting rid of some. There, that's better. A 5-star gravity seal, Each point in the star seal goes to a wrist and an ankle, while the fifth seal goes on the head, most likely the neck somewhere. Finally, the middle of the star, the pentagon, would stay on the torso. This keeps the gravity from just affecting one part of the body and keeps everything equal. Little did Naruto know that he said that out loud. Mito looked at Naruto with surprise all over her face. She had only begun to work on the seal yesterday and he just basically broke down the seal and made it better. Let's see, the design is a little funny looking, Naruto mused, as a triangle on each wrist, ankle, and on the neck with a pentagon on the chest would look weird. Let's see if I can add some kind of cloaking seal with this, he said analytically, looking at the seal in front of him. He dug into his pouch and took out a white and blank scroll. He drew his new design on the scroll. He drew it twice, what it'll look like sealed and unseal. The sealed version would be each triangle on his wrists, ankles, neck, and the pentagon on his chest. Each triangle would contain the same number, like for an example 2, the pentagon on the chest would have the same number. The unsealed version would be a plain star on his chest. Damn, I couldn't think of a way to cloak the points. Oh well, you could always wrap some tape around them, he said, still talking to himself. He closed the scroll, dipped his brush in the ink, and wrote, 5-starred gravity seal, and under that he wrote his name. Creator. Uzumaki Naruto. After that he leaned back and rested his head against the cushion of the couch. Finished. I'm going to have to apply this later. It will double, no triple the results of my taijutsu training. The downside, I'll have to apply it in a couple of years, or I'll stunt my growth, he said, still forgetting where he was at. Mito sat on the dining room table, sipping tea as Naruto worked on the seal for the past hour and a half. She was amazed at his skill in fuinjutsu. To be honest, she wasn't that good at his age, she was just beginning to learn how to do a simple storage seal. So you're finally finished, huh? Watching you better my own seal and customizing it to better benefit the user has been amazing, she said, taking another sip of tea. Naruto flinched again at hearing her voice. He turned to see her sipping tea. Of course, my finished design would have distributed the gravity equally throughout the entire body. But yours is good too, she said, finding her cup empty for the third time in the past hour. Why can't I sense you? He said, with the subject frustrating him. Oh, that reminds me, she said, getting up from the table and walking in her room. Naruto just sat there with an annoyed face. She is acting way different than a couple of days ago. It's like, in public she'll act like your regular stick up the hyuga. But around me, she'll act more relaxed. And she still didn't answer my question, he thought, hitting his head on the cushion as he heard the shower turn on. She walked out of her room about 10 minutes later. She was wearing a regular dark red robe and a pair of relaxing slippers. Her long hair was slightly wet and flowed down to the middle of her back. Sorry to keep you waiting, so what did you want to know? She said, sitting on the couch. For some reason Naruto sensed her before she even walked into the room. So he wasn't surprised when she sat down next to him. I wanted to know why I wasn't able to sense you. But now I can, he said, looking at her, lightly blushing. Why can I sense you now? He said. Oh, that's all you wanted to know. It's just something I made about 15 years ago, she said, getting up and going back in her room. That doesn't answer my question, Naruto muttered, watching her leave. Suddenly he couldn't sense her anymore, and yet she was walking back in the living room. See what just happened? It's like your chakra signature vanished completely. She smirked. It's because of these, she said, reaching into her robe to pull out the same seal tags she wore as a hairpiece. These tags are my greatest work. After a certain event, suppressing my chakra became extremely difficult. So I created these. While I have them activated, these tags prevent my chakra from leaking out, she said, sitting down. Then she started scratching her cheek. Well, they don't prevent the leaking, they just help suppress the chakra that did leak, she said, smiling at Naruto's confused face. That's possible, he said, bewildered beyond belief. He then began thinking. I have more questions. Why did I get attacked by that dragon out there? And what did it mean by which one I possessed? I think I've waited long enough for these answers. Okay. You were attacked because that's what he does. He attacks me every chance he gets. He attacked you because you're a stranger. I'm surprised you're not dead. Hey. Naruto childishly prolonged the word. Are you questioning my skills? He said, receiving a smack on the head. No interruptions, she said, smiling. As for the second question, he was speaking about the bonus condition Uzumakis have. I have no idea why I'm explaining this, but Uzumakis have two bloodlines. The rarest of them all being the Rinnegan. I and two others have had the Rinnegan since the Raikudo Sennin. Counting you would be the fourth. The other is our long lifespan, with the conditions being the subject at hand. She said, making sure Naruto was paying attention. She continued, there's three conditions that vary from Uzumaki to Uzumaki. The first being a large reserves of chakra, with this that Uzumaki would most likely be a ninjutsu specialist. The second being an increased amount of stamina, that Uzumaki would become a taijutsu specialist. And the third, you probably already guessed it, would be a highly developed intellect to become a genjutsu specialist with. Is she saying that, because I can't do a simple genjutsu, that I'm not smart? Naruto thought to himself. I learned from watching you fight, that all three conditions coexist within you. You showed that despite your age, you can do various amount of techniques and have a large amount of stamina. Though I haven't seen you do a single genjutsu, that high intellect is still there, she said, smiling at the genin. She chuckled when he seemed to faint for a short second. Now it's my turn for a question, she said. If you're an Uzumaki, why aren't you in Uzushiogakure with the rest of the Uzumakis? She said, surprising Naruto with her question. Naruto kept the surprise from reaching his face. Why do you question my lineage? He said, activating his Rinnegan. Shouldn't this be enough? He asked, deactivating it. She would be lying if she said she was surprised. I already knew about your Rinnegan. I questioned your lineage because Uzumakis have traits. You only follow a couple of those traits. Give me some traits then. Naruto said, resting his head on the cushion. Uzumakis have red hair. I get my hair from my father. He said quickly. Your father has silver hair, with blonde streaks. Mito asked with a raised eyebrow. I don't know, I'm a natural blonde. I don't know why my hair's changing. He answered. Mito nodded and thought of other traits. Uzumakis have a long lifespan. I'm 6. Uzumakis are honorable. And I'm not. Naruto asked with a tick mark on his forehead. Uzumakis rarely contain their anger. If only you knew how hard it is to contain said anger. He thought. It's hard to contain my anger. Uzumakis your age don't have that much chakra. Mito said. I'm a special child. Uzumakis don't have whisker marks. She said, crossing her arms. I don't have whisker marks. He said, touching one of his cheeks. Where's your bathroom at? He asked. She raised an eyebrow. First door on the right. Naruto ran in the bathroom, turned on the light and looked in the mirror. Like she said, 6 whisker marks, 3 on each cheek. These fully came back. He thought, looking at his cheeks to see the same whisker marks he had all his life. He looked up at his hair to see the silver coloring. And my hair, it's nearly all silver. A couple of days ago it was almost all blonde, he complained. He checked his nails to see that they were slightly longer than normal. And his canines were also slightly longer. His eyes were still electric blue and his pupils were unslitted. He gave a sigh in relief when he noticed that walking around with slitted pupils would raise questions he didn't have the answers to. Does this have to do with the fox? He suddenly thought. Did I really absorb all of its chakra? He asked himself. He lifted his shirt up and molded some of his chakra. Like always, the seal appeared. But the weird thing was that it was glowing red. Now what's happening? He asked. Naruto-kun, what's happening? Naruto heard his mother yell in his mind. It was like an earthquake was happening. I don't know, I think the Kyuubi is returning, he said, letting his shirt fall when Mito's scent got closer. It's like I'm becoming a fox, he thought while mentally crying anime tears. Naruto-kun, is everything alright? Mito asked. Fight. Something whispered in Naruto's head. Naruto shook his head. Yes, everything's alright. Let's get back to the living room. I still have questions, he said as she nodded and turned around. Naruto stayed for a second, before looking at the mirror and seen a flash image of the Kyuubi on top of his. Come on, Naruto-kun, he heard Mito yell from the living room. Naruto turned the lights off and walked out of the bathroom. Mito, why didn't you seek me out a year, if these things concerned you? Naruto asked, crossing his arms. The surprise was visible on Mito's face. She looked down and thought. The Kyuubi. Now it was Naruto's turn to be surprised. He was grateful she was still looking down. What does Nine Tails have to do with this? He asked. Don't act stupid. A year ago the Kyuubi began acting up, which was surprising. Since the seal I used to contain him with should have had him unable to do anything but breathe, she said, her blue eyes now looking at him. It entered my dreams around that time and it said one name, Naruto. It later came to my knowledge that a kid was found just a couple days before. So I kept my eye on you, watching your training, your fighting, your every actions. This is starting to get creepy, Naruto thought as the creepy feelings showed on his face. After the first few months, I realized that you had the Rinnegan. But other than that, I thought you were a regular, but special Uzumaki child, due to the Rinnegan, she added. I would always keep my distance when watching you. I watched you interact and train with your friends. It was only recently that I decided to make contact with you, a week ago, she said as the atmosphere around them grew more thick. That's around the time my hair started changing, Naruto thought out of nowhere. When I grabbed your collar, the Kyuubi contacted me again. The contacts have been getting more frequent the longer I watched you. But this time he said way more than your name. XXX flashback XXX. Mito stood in a darkened alley, waiting for her target to appear. She felt his chakra began moving from his position at the dango shop, and move it did, fast. She wasn't surprised he could move that fast after the amount of training he went through. Her moment came when Naruto zoomed by her, only to be stopped by her hand grabbing his collar. Suddenly she was transported to her mindscape. The world is too big for the both of us, there can be only one, Naruto, the Kyuubi said from all around her before she was brought back to reality, to just notice Naruto looking at her seal tags. I see you have an interest in Fuinjutsu. XXX end flashback XXX. Mito looked at Naruto. After that I had a little friend of mine follow you on your mission, she said, pointing to the spot by Naruto's head. The blonde was confused and turned his head. He didn't see anything there, but he noticed there was a slight distortion in the area. He was surprised to see a chameleon appear. Its eyes already had sort of a ripple effect in them, but what shouldn't have been surprising was the light purple coloring. So you had this thing follow me, using the Rinnegan's connected vision ability to keep an eye on me? Naruto stated rather than questioned. Mito nodded. If our fate is to fight for the power of the Kyuubi, then I'm going to have to research on my opponent. I can't have the beast fall into the wrong hands, she said, leaning back into the cushion of the couch. When do you want to have the fight? Naruto asked, heading towards the door. We'll have it when you're older. Can't be arrested for nearly killing a 6-year-old, she said, chuckling, clearly aware of her power. The silver-haired child laughed. Sure, we'll see, he said, walking out the door. I'm sure by the time we have our fight, my strength will grow immensely, he thought, disappearing in a whirlwind of leaves, finally heading home. XXX Omake back home XXX. Naruto appeared in front of his big brother's residence. Home. He said, running in the house. I'm so hungry. He said, running into the kitchen after his stomach growled. Where's my ramen at? He said, looking in the cabinet. No. He screamed when he just seen a wrapping of one of his instant cups. Where's it at? He said as his stomach growled again. As Hiruzen walked in the house, he ran to the man and grabbed his pants. Feed me, he yelled. Ah, get off me, he said, pushing Naruto off of him. And plus you can cook. But you're better, he said. Hiruzen chuckled. Flattery will get you nowhere, he said as his stomach growled. Naruto smirked, loving the sound of his rumbling stomach. See, now you have to feed me. Hiruzen scoffed and walked into the kitchen. You're lucky I'm hungry too, he said.